FIGU-Zeitzeichen Special Edition number 145, March 2, 2025.
Democracy as it is and as it should be. Semjase Silver Star Center, Billy. Friday, February 4, 2005, 12:55 a.m.
The word democracy comes from Greek and means rule of the people or rule of the people. The majority of Earth's people mistakenly believe that the forms of democracy practiced on our planet, according to the principles and rules of terrestrial politics, are genuine forms of democracy in the literal sense. However, this is not the case, for a true, direct democracy only exists when all power, decision-making authority, and authority actually lie directly with the people. The leading forces must be directly elected by the people and faithfully enforce their decisions. Without exception, all decisions of the people must be made directly by majority vote, completely uninfluenced by any propaganda and without prior consultation. Other forms, such as the democracies common on Earth, are such only in name. In fact, they are nothing more than party and government dictatorships that have fraudulently pinned the label democracy on their lapels, even when they call themselves high-sounding names like representative national democracy, majoritarian democracy, consensus concordance democracy, delegative democracy, or deliberative democracy. True democracy is only possible when the people stand together in unity and realize that they must take responsibility into their own hands because they alone are the real and true sovereigns of the state. Unfortunately, however, the people of the earth are seriously lacking this awareness, as well as responsibility, a sense of community and unity, which is why true democracies worthy of the name cannot emerge. The reasons for this can be broadly summarized as follows. 1. Human consciousness, character, lack of willingness to take responsibility for one's own life and for the well-being of the community, indifference, stupidity, obedience to authority, cult religious and sectarian delusion, suppression of independence or education for dependence, lack of self-education, lack of knowledge regarding one's own possibilities and duties, lack of or insufficient knowledge of the creative natural laws and commandments, which leads to illogicality, disorientation, and aimlessness in people's thinking, making them susceptible to manipulation. 2. Political and party systems. Undemocratic structures of the political and party system, lack of human qualifications among politicians, and those in positions of responsibility, bribery and venality, legal immunity of politicians, business leaders, and those in positions of responsibility, lobbying, unbridled quest for power, excessive materialism, manipulation of the people through propaganda, electoral fraud and electoral rigging, inadequately organized and monitored electoral systems, nepotism, media disinformation, etc. 3. Global overpopulation, poverty, violence, physical, conscious, and psychological degeneration of people are being bred by overpopulation. Consequences: disturbances in personality development and interpersonal relationships, moral and moral decay, disintegrating family and social structures, chaos and anarchy, the prevalence of rigid power structures, loss of values, and the collapse of law and order. The Free Encyclopedia Wikipedia defines the term politics as follows. The term politics is derived from the Greek word polis for city or community, or it generally refers to a predictive behavior within society directed toward a specific goal. However, to this day, there is ultimately no consensus as to whether power, conflict, domination, order, or peace constitute the main category of politics. http://wikipedia.org Wiki Politik. This definition already clearly reveals what characterizes the forms of earthly politics: tangled party systems, in which the opinions and interests of the parties, their supporters, and their beneficiaries are irreconcilably opposed. Disagreement and conflict are the result, which in turn prevents the necessary logical measures from being taken. This predictive behavior is not aimed at the common good, but primarily at maintaining power for purely selfish purposes. The democratic principle of free opinion formation does not prevail in the parties, but rather a terrorist coercion of opinion and faction, which forces party members and representatives to subordinate themselves to the will of the party bosses and to sacrifice their own opinions to the dictates of the powerful. There can be no question of representatives being bound only to their own conscience regarding their decisions, as stipulated by law. The party ideology, philosophy, or the party platform corresponds to a dream image that does not correspond to the reality of human and social life. A current example of the failure of politics is the G8 summit of the 8 most powerful and economically powerful nations: Germany, France, England, Italy, Japan, Canada, Russia, the USA, and the European Commission, in June 2007 in Heiligendamm, Germany, where, among other things, measures to combat climate change were negotiated. Once again, the incompetent US President Bush blocked all efforts to achieve effective resolutions and measures. Instead of acting quickly and effectively, those in power continually pursue their own economic, military, and sectarian interests. The real cause of climate change and many other ills on Earth is criminally and cowardly concealed, namely, the exploding growth of the Earth's population, with all its dire consequences for humanity, the environment, and the planet. See FIGU Bulletin Nos. 36 and 37, and FIGU Open Letter Number 1. The main problem with earthly forms of government is that rulers are not directly elected and appointed to office by the people. As a rule, the leadership of the state is determined indirectly by the elected parties and their leaders. The population essentially serves only the purpose of supporting the party representatives, striving for power with their votes at certain intervals, thereby transferring to them all decision-making power and authority, something that politicians hypocritically call the exercise of free democratic elections. This makes it impossible for the people to appoint truly responsible, knowledgeable, and wise individuals and suitable leaders through direct election. However, it must be fairly noted that these are usually not available because they are given little or no opportunity for advancement within the parties. Rather, a corrupt party apparatus, based on dictatorial power and hierarchical structures, determines who forms the government and conducts state affairs in the name of the people. After elections, those in power rarely feel committed to the people and the common good, but rather only to maintaining their own power. Critics and rivals are eliminated whenever possible and silenced by every means possible, including character assassination. To make the people compliant, the parties utilize large-scale propaganda machines financed by state funds, taxes, donations, and hidden bribes. If the people are asked for their will in a referendum, they are so confused and unsettled beforehand by opinion-forming measures that a majority decision usually fits perfectly into the politicians' plans. Undesirable vote results are acknowledged by the political bigwigs with feigned tolerance and immediately undermined once the people have forgotten everything and fallen back into the desired indifference and lethargy. If necessary, the stupid people are made to vote on the same issue over and over again, with ever new proposals until the desired result is achieved. If one observes neutrally and impartially the manner in which decisions are made in democratically governed states, it can be seen that the parties, like the malignant EU cancer, are in fact dictatorial rulers who exert suggestive influence on the people, rendering them unable to decide freely. The will of the people is simply criminally overlooked and ignored when it does not suit the political mafia's agenda. However, the people themselves are largely to blame for this injustice, because a unified will of the people, guided by creatively natural laws and commandments, does not exist. If there were agreement among the people in this regard, the logical consequence would be that politicians, governments, and other responsible persons would have to provide evidence of their qualifications. The people could immediately remove an incumbent if that person was demonstrably incapable or unwilling to discharge his office according to law and order.
Politics is a constantly renewed illusion-inspired oscillation between anarchy and tyranny. Albert Einstein.
This sentence describes the inherent inability of politics to create a true order according to creative natural laws. As long as the vast majority of humanity does not turn to the spiritual teachings as teachings of life, according to Nicodemeon Henoch, and does not create real peace, freedom, harmony, and love within themselves and externally, and politics only strives to fool the people, disempower them, subject them to total surveillance, exploit them materially, and live at their expense, there can be no true peace on earth.
The spirit of democracy cannot be imposed from without. It must come from within. Mahatma Gandhi.
To overcome party systems, it would be necessary to resist the criminal machinations of parties, business leaders, religions, sects, and profiteers, and replace them with a true democracy in which the false old is replaced and superseded by the true new. Even Mahatma Gandhi failed to do this because, although he was able to free the people of India from the colonial rule of the British Empire through degenerate non-violence, he achieved nothing else. Had he brought violent non-violence to bear, he would not only have built a true democracy, but would also have had to eliminate the caste system, degenerate religious and social customs, and all other falsehoods, and establish a functioning government based on the principle of the popular welfare. Only when people realize that they are the true sovereigns of their state, and that those in power and leadership must decide and act exclusively for the good of their people, will they be able to free themselves from their tyrants and realize true democracies. This insight and realization must spread throughout the entire population so that they can unite and pursue the right path to democracy. This will only be possible, however, when a large portion of humanity lives with conscious self-responsibility and thinks, feels, and acts to the best of its ability in accordance with the creative natural laws and commandments. Today, unfortunately, this is only possible in small groups that align themselves with the creative principles. As long as the vast majority of people are not taught the creative truth and do not abandon their obedience to authority, they will continue to allow themselves to be bullied helplessly by irresponsible governments and by the erroneous and insane teachings of the religions and sects that enslave them, sacrificing their freedom and independence on the bloody altar of religious belief and materialism.
Politics is the sum total of the means necessary to acquire and maintain power, and to make the most useful use of power. Machiavelli, around 1515.
The motivation of most politicians is not determined by the desire to selflessly serve the people and implement the people's will as an executive body, acting without arbitrary authority and without a popular mandate, as would be good and desirable. Rather, they are usually concerned with satisfying their lust for power, striving for material wealth and a luxurious life, extorting sexual services and debauchery from those dependent on them, and so on. They are often driven by an excessive need for recognition, selfishness and egotism, a lack of humanity, and an inability to take responsibility. Instead, they prefer to arrogantly spout big speeches, fight their way to the top through ruthlessness, bullying, and sycophancy, and sometimes even literally walk over dead bodies. All of this embodies the degenerate form of earthly politics. A neutral, positive, and balanced form of politics, such as would be perfectly possible and urgently needed on Earth, is described by the following motto.
Politics is the sum of all activities aimed at preparing and making decisions that are binding for society as a whole and / or oriented toward the common good, and that benefit society as a whole. Thomas Meyer.
Anyone who truly wants to lead and guide a community for its well-being must be educated in many ways as a true human being and know what they are talking about and how to act according to the respective situation and requirements in order to be forward-looking, constructive, and progressive. Such a person always gives their fellow human beings only well-thought-out advice that is aligned with the laws and commandments of creation and nature, and develops corresponding guidelines, according to which people can then accept or reject everything at their own discretion and in free choice. This includes measures that may seem harsh to the uninitiated, but are necessary to avert dire consequences, such as an immediate halt to births or birth controls, according to harsh but humane guidelines in the case of overpopulation. Accepting or rejecting advice has certain consequences that come into effect according to the preceding cause. If a person acts correctly, they reap good or balanced results. If they act incorrectly, they reap negative results. If he acts contrary to creation, he will reap the negative fruits of his actions or omissions. A true sage only issues orders for the benefit of all humanity. This is in contrast to politicians, the military, popes, gurus, etc., who issue orders according to their own discretion and for their own benefit. Proper leadership and guidance requires a great deal of humility, neutrality, anti-materialism, patience, peace, love, and understanding, as well as a great deal of knowledge and wisdom, acquired specifically and built up through life experience. This kind of worldly wisdom was and is, in a highly developed form, characteristic of the true prophets who have appeared from time to time. Humanity should consider itself fortunate that this is now the case again, namely in the person of Billy Edward Albert Meyer, the prophet of the modern age, note 28.2. 2025. Billy prefers to be called mission fulfiller or simply teacher instead of prophet. See 118th Contact, Saturday, March the 21st, 2015, 2:43 p.m. It should be people like him that the people trust, namely virtuous people who act wisely, selflessly, and guided by love. If the advice and guidelines of these wise men were consistently followed, then paradise on earth could be realized. People should therefore listen to the advice of the knowledgeable and wise, explore it through their own thought, and understand its logic and justice, thereby recognizing its high values. They would thereby gradually develop into self-thinking, self-responsible people, and fulfill their evolution.
The fate of our culture is that it has developed much more materially than spiritually in terms of consciousness. Albert Schweitzer.
A true democracy requires that people recognize each other as absolutely equal and realize that each person must perform their own duties to the best of their ability in the service and for the benefit of all. Human virtues such as true inner peace, respect for life, tolerance, kindness, patience, love, and charity are extremely helpful in this. People must learn to restrain and control their emotions, their egoism, their impulses, and their greed for all material things, which they can learn through the study of spiritual teachings, or the teachings of life, and the regular practice of appropriate meditation. However, the realization of a true democracy also requires that the most important creative natural principles and guidelines be learned, recognized, and followed. This includes the insight that each person must bear sole and complete responsibility for the consequences of their actions. With their thoughts, people set in motion causal forces within their consciousness and psyche, which, according to the laws of creation, lead to very specific effects and, in turn, are the causal forces for new effects. Each individual therefore shares responsibility for gradually realizing true democracies, for every person can and should always begin with themselves if they want to achieve something good and progressive. Quote from FIGU Bulletin number 60, "Democracy means that the people, in unison, determine the welfare of the state and the population. But what is actually understood, handled and practiced as democracy by the people and those in power, is a political form governed in a disastrous and hostile manner by those in power and by a very stupid majority of the people.